Howdy, howdy. Welcome back to my channel on building out an expedition camper entirely from scratch in DIY. And this all started from chassis rails and building out the camper box and now building out the whole interior and adding some finishing touches to the outside. This has been a tough one. Yeah, that's right. For those of you who watch my channel, you know this has been a big project and there's been certainly many challenges along the way, but this has been one of the most difficult ones. Let's get into it and why that is. Now, really mounting this L-track along the side of the camper really isn't all that hard in itself. You have to, of course, get it level, and of course there's those two sheets or two pieces of it because really, you know, this is about a 13-foot long section and can't really go out and just have shipped to you a 13-foot long section so easily. So it's a couple different shorter sections that are then abutted up against each other end to end, and of course they have to be brought level to each other, and all of the holes, all 30 plus of them, have to be drilled exactly where they need to be to ensure that all the pieces and the holes all line up. And then, of course, just go down and basically drill a bunch of holes, right? Start with a small bit and go to a bigger bit and or go right to the tap. But it's been more challenging than that. And let me get into why that is.
Holes. Lots of holes. All right. So how do we install an awning mount on a composite camper? In this case, Total Composites camper with the steel bar embedded within the wall. Very challenging, and I will just say hole by hole, and each hole can take a long time, sometimes over an hour for a hole. So let's go through the process a little bit here. First of all, we start with this small drill bit, and we drill our pilot hole. After we mark, of course, these are all marks here for L-track that we mount along here. You can see some down here. But those are all holes for the L-track every 4 inches, way more frequently than needed. Every 6 would have been more than adequate need. Every foot would have been fine, particularly as I'm going to glue this on here. That's going to both seal up the holes from any water intrusion. And that adhesive is incredibly strong, about 500 pounds of tensile strength per square inch. In addition, I'm going to have all these 1/4-20 bolts are screwed into this steel bar that's embedded within a fiberglass tube that is behind 3/4 inches of plywood. So there's a lot going on in this wall. So you got to drill a pilot hole, then I drill a bigger hole to make sure that the tapping bit can actually get through, or also the shaft of the bit. Some of them had a hex shaft on them, some of the bits I went through, and I say went through because I have gone through 3 sets of drill bits. Granted, I'm only using 3 different size drills, but I'm going through them like crazy. And it's in part because the fiberglass skin is very abrasive, but that's not mostly it. It's mostly that fiberglass tube, the GRP, or glass reinforced plastic, that's on the inside there. That steel bar is on the inside of it, and that's embedded within this wall structure here. Going through the first layer of that just eats through bits. And in addition to that, we also have to drill through the steel bar, and that steel bar has not been fixed. It's been basically floating or wobbling inside of that steel tube. It should not be, but it is. And so some of the insulation that was supposed to be put inside there did not get all put inside of there, between the inside of that GRP tube that the steel bar is inside of, to both stabilize it and also better insulate it. So that steel bar wobbles. It also pushes all the way far back. And I say far back, I have a 2-inch thickness of the wall. 2 inches. To get through all that steel bar, I basically have to go through 1 7/8 inches of depth to get all the way through that steel bar, and that sometimes doesn't even go quite all the way through enough to get a tap all the way through it, because then the tapping bit starts bottoming out on the GRP on the other side of the wall, the inside side of the wall. So I have to then tap it that far, put a screw into it, pull the bar out by tightening these screws up onto the wall like you can see here, pull the bar out, drill the next one, hopefully get it all the way through and tapped all the way through, put a screw into it, pull it out, right, and then go take this screw out and go back and do that one. So hence why it can take as much as an hour, particularly as I'm going small bit to big bit to then our medium bit that actually creates the hole, the appropriate size hole for the tap. Tap it maybe part way, put a screw in, and of course in the process of this, all through every step, I'm also vacuuming between every step to make sure I'm cleaning out debris of this hole. Put that screw in, pull that bar out as far as I can, do the next one, and go on and on and on down sequence. And I believe there's about 30 of these holes all the way through here. I am down to the final 3 now. I say final 3 is really 5 because one of them has a tap bit stuck inside of it, one of them has a drill bit stuck inside of it that broke off inside of those holes. That's how challenging this has been. It's not been easy at all. I am doing this all, for the most part, by hand, other than my drill driver here. And it's tough because that bar wobbles, it moves around, and so stabilizing it helps, but initially you can't quite get it stabilized. It takes quite a while to get it stabilized. even the next hole down after a screw, it wobbled a lot. Now we got a lot of stabilization because now there's over 24 screws that are embedded within this. So now that all those are in there, these last 3 are going to go quite easily and stable. It's because I put glue and some expanding foam sealant down into this cavity here before I put on the door to help stabilize that bar and insulate it. And so that's also creating some stabilization down on this side of it. All the rest of the way down, this 13-foot section here, past this door here, is basically, for the most part, has been unstabilized. So yes, it's been, or for the most part anyways, challenging. I will also have to go back and extract that tapping bit and that drill bit, and then re-tap those out and get screws in there. So that's going to take a little bit of time for those two. So it's been challenging, to say the least. But let's go through the process here. Now that I've already gotten the small drill bit all the way through, the bigger bit just to make sure the tapping bit can get through. Now I'm going to go through the appropriate size bit that will be for the tap, take that all the way through, and then once I get that through, then I can of course do the tap, clean it out, do the tap, and so forth. I'm also using tapping fluid all the time, and sometimes many times per hole that I drill, particularly as these drill bits start getting dulled out, which happens only after a few holes. So let's go through the process here. I've already cleaned off this bit, so there's no debris on it, fiberglass debris or metal shavings of the steel bar. Put the tapping fluid on. I've got my jig on here to make sure that I've got a good flat perpendicular hole being drilled in. And sometimes also, a lot of times what I do, I found if I put this up this way, this helps to counteract my forces in the weight of pulling this down, making that hole slightly angled instead of perpendicular. So, and also I have been using headphones, and the reason why, or hearing protection, is because there's a lot of noise in drilling all these, particularly when that steel bar was bouncing around inside there. Now it's not bouncing around so much, so it's just the drill noise, but still a lot of noise nonetheless. So often I'll go ahead and pause it partway through, get all those shavings out of there off the drill bit, and then I'll go ahead and put some more tapping fluid on and keep going. And I put a lot of pressure into this drill because it takes a lot of pressure, so I have to keep myself balanced while on these ladders here. And I say ladders, often I'm straddling 2 of them. And then in addition to that, not only keeping a lot of pressure in here to keep myself upright, but just taking my time, going at a slow speed. I find that's worked best than a higher speed for going and drill through this steel. So there we go. So we got through, we punched through that steel bar. And now that the steel bar is pulled out to the edge of this wall as far as it can, which is still about 1.25 inches in, that's a big benefit. Now I got a little gap there before I go to the other side of that fiberglass tube that steel bar is inside of, which is only about 1/8 of an inch thick. It's probably about 3 millimeters. So then that's all I have before I go through the inside wall. And of course I don't want to do that. And that's why I have stops set up on these and measure depth here to ensure that I'm not going through all the way. Now that that hole's done, and I can feel my battery's already starting to go low. There's a smaller battery, but they go through them about every, call it 10 holes or less. I do have to have extra batteries already on the charge. Now that hole's drilled, before I put a tap in there, I want to go ahead and clean it out just to make sure I don't have a bunch of shavings and stuff stuck in there. And so you can see I also vacuum off the drill bit, so that way it's all clean again, getting that fiberglass debris, any little bit of wood debris that may still be in there, and of course that steel debris too, so I'm not transferring that to the next hole, and therefore not braiding the bit down as much, hoping that bit lasts longer. And so that's one thing I do. Try to keep this process going as well as possible. Of course, add tapping fluid to the tap, and then get tapping. Is actually the easiest part of this whole process. Probably the funnest part in the fact that I've broken one. And that was because that steel bar was pressed up against a fiberglass tube on the inside. And of course the tapping bit was going through the hole. It bottomed out on that. There was too much force. It snapped it off. That was absolutely a bummer. And it's a 2-flute tap, and I've only been able to find 3 or 4 flute tap extractors. I have found one 2-flute one, but it's challenging. And one thing when tapping this, before these holes were in there, you could actually feel, I could feel that steel bar rotating inside of there, also putting more strain on the tap, also making it harder to get this thing all the way tapped through. So hence why I'd have to sometimes even just tap it part way, tap the other one part way, and then put a whole, put a screw partially in each one, and then come back and just keep working it until I get a tap all the way through. I've also found that using this ratcheting, until I'm going very slow and carefully here, I'm going by feel. I don't want to put too much force on this. And using a ratchet, I am getting more of a lever to be able to push this through. And also that lever force can cause this to get cockeyed. So I'm being very careful to keep that stable and straight, so it doesn't get that way. And also being very careful the force I'm putting on this. I do need a fair amount of force to push this tap through the steel. I found that out when using a more traditional tap like I have here. And this is, by the way, a bottoming out tap. And so it actually takes threads all the way right to a flat point, unlike normal tap that has actually a pointed end and it tapers to that pointed end. And that's what I found out where I broke it, and because it pushed up against that fiberglass once it got through your hole. Now I'm using what's called a plug tap, which is basically, it's kind of the combination between the two. I found that works best. It's got a little bit of a taper point at the end, so it can find that hole, get it started, and then it just has a little bit that protrudes out the other side. But now that I have at least a 1/4 inch of gap between the steel bar, just an air gap between the steel bar and the fiberglass tube on the side, that's okay. I can go through the hole, and I do want to go all the way through the hole. And I'll feel that. I can feel it right now. I'm just getting through that hole completely. Now I'm just running these threads through just a little bit more, just make sure all cleaned out. And then once I feel those threads basically on the tap bottoming out on the hole that I've just tapped, I carefully go ahead and extract it. This is where, of course, there isn't much force. Using a tapping fluid really helps. Just going nice and smooth and easy. Could I have used a drill bit extractor? Yeah, I could have. I actually own one and thought about it. But because that steel bar was so far in there and so wobbly, like it would have broken the tip off that. And those also, the drill bit on the ends of those drill bit taps are about almost a 1/2 inch long. So it would protrude probably through all the way through the wall and the inside of my camper. Again, not what I want. So now I've got this tapped. I'm going to vacuum off my tap. The metal shavings are on there. And also clean this hole out and put a bolt in. And then we have 2 more to go. And till we get the 2 we have to extract. So getting close. You can see what I've done here too to turn the vacuum on. I've set it up so I don't have to go all the way back down the ground and back up again. I'm trying to minimize the time I'm going up and down. I have all my tools up here on top of the ladders, because every time I go up and down the ladder, of course, I'm risking getting hurt. And so I've already fallen once off the ladder, go up and down here. Being in precarious positions, holding stuff in your hands, minimizing chances going up and down, just minimizes the chance of injury. So now that this is tapped, I can put this screw in, and there's a pretty long screw to make sure I get all the way through the tapped hole in the bar. And when I get this screwed in, this isn't so much so now, but I can tighten this, and as I tighten this, tight enough to not make sure I'm hurting, the wall structure at all. If I go back in and check these other ones, make sure they're tight. And before, as I do that, when I put this one in, I pulled out, these others in could be tightened up dramatically because that bar was still wobbly and waves in there. And of course, I'm pulling it out each time. And so each subsequent time I get a bolt in, I could pull that bar a little bit more by tightening up the previous bolts already put in. And that allows me to get the bar out. Now, I'm already almost down to the end where it is glued down this end. Only 2 holes in here. This bar's got almost 30 bolts in all the way up to this point. So it is absolutely pulled in. And I could feel it. I could hear it. And about the midpoint here, as I was pulling these bolts tight, I could hear it actually squishing up against a little bit of insulation that was inside of this channel here between the steel bar and that fiberglass tube that's in. And I could hear that compressing and pull up against and feeling it really tightening up. And also that wobble go away every time I would try to drill it or whatever else, which was really obnoxiously loud and noticeable. And so now we've got a dramatic improvement to finishing this up. We've got 2 holes left, so I got to get this done. All right, so here we go. Final 2. That was brutal. That was brutally difficult and hard. But I have all of them in minus 2, where I've got to remove a bit out of them. And so I'm going to do that now. I'm going to extract those bits and replace them with, of course, tapped holes and screws. But all these are in, the bars pulled out. Even these last final 2 right here down by the door, these last final 2 as I put them in and tighten them up, oh my gosh, you can feel that bar come out, feel it squishing up the insulation that's inside that fiberglass U-tube, and really pulling each one of these in as I as I tighten each one up one after the other. So these are all tightened up, these things are in. Now what I can do, it's going to be tricky still, I somehow have to glue up a piece of L-track, 2 pieces because of the length, 2 pieces of L-track butted up end to end, and screw these in without the bar going away. The bar probably will, so I'll have to be able to put some longer screws in, pull it back out, and then as the L-track is being glued on, you know, keep putting longer screws in to pull that bar out, put shorter ones in the subsequent hole, and just keep kind of pulling it out until I get it tight with those shorter screws I want to be able to use in there, which are still longer than I'd like. But hey, it's part because I got plywood, 3/4 inch, then a 1/8 inch fiberglass tube, right? And then, you know, that 1/4 inch steel bar. So when you add, and the skin, of course, of the camper here. So you add that all up, I've got to go in about 1.5 inches to go all the way through that bar. It's a lot. It's a lot of screw to go through. I wish it was constructed with the bar on the outside here. It would work so much better, but I'm sure there's reasons why they did it this way. So anyways, it's on there. I'm stoked. So this was a terrible project. It was one of those setback projects that you spend days and days and days on, and a lot of money and tools unnecessarily to get it done, and a lot of extra work. But now it's done. I can at least get my awning mount on and get on back to the inside to finish all that stuff up.
But the inside will come back in a future video to finish that up, and a lot more coming up with that, the electrical, mechanical systems and all that getting done, as well as a cabinetry by a in-house CNC machine I made up. So that's pretty cool. But really getting the L-track on, started with really that small section at the back, because that's where that steel bar inside of the wall was tighter to the wall, to the outside of the wall. So really getting that glued on, getting the screws put in there, start pulling that steel bar out to the outer wall, and then taking this bigger one in and just keep going from screw hole to screw hole, wherever they fit in, it could stick in, and just keep kind of grinding them, tightening them down. And as they get tightened in, move on to a shorter bolt if need be, meaning actually remove one of the longer bolts and go to a shorter bolt, or just keep adding more bolts until the steel bar inside the wall just kept getting pulled out, and you could literally feel it and hear it getting pulled out. And of course that green tape alongside there is just to make sure that any squeeze out from that adhesive sealant doesn't just smear all around the wall. It keeps it kind of contained and clean. But then of course also coming back in and putting a nice little bead of adhesive sealant along the top, just to make sure that no water or anything kind of gets in there, in between there, and just pulls up, make sure it's a nice clean shedding of water over this L-track. And so that's pretty much it. Putting on some little plastic end caps onto that to give it a nice finished look, which have a nice rounded profile to them, and those simply are just glued in place. And then make sure these bolts are tightened down, then just simply letting it be and cleaning up that adhesive sealant. So it was definitely a 1 week, it was a 1 week ass kicker. There's no other way to say it. It was difficult to get this one single little project done, but it's done, and now we can move on to a lot of other things, which means also adding some storage mounts to the back wall, which do go a lot smoother, and I'll show those in a future video, as well as really coming up is a bunch of other things, getting these garage doors electrically actuated, which is very cool, and of course getting the camper painted. So all that's coming up very soon. Now this L-track is on and it looks great. Tell me what you think in the comments below if you have any other suggestions how to install it, but it is now in place, so now the painting can begin. Please subscribe, hang on, and watch for all the more cool videos coming on this DIY Expedition Camper build out.